Hereby call to order the Roseville City Council meeting for Monday, March 18th, 2024. Ms. Olson, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Etten.
Here.
Councilmember Schroeder.
Here.
Councilmember Groff.
Here.
Councilmember Strawn.
Here.
Mayor Rowe.
Here. And with us at the dais, by way of introductions, we have our City Attorney, Rachel Tierney, who's on my right at the very end, and our Assistant City Manager, Rebecca Olson, is on my left at the other end, filling in ably for our City Manager, Pat Trudgeon, who's not able to be with us this evening. We will have an opportunity to hear from staff and other guests as the meeting progresses, and we'll make those introductions at those times. I would remind folks, if you have a cell phone, to be sure and silence it, or otherwise assure that it doesn't disrupt the meeting. And for members of the public, there are meeting materials in the back of the room under the clock by the back door. There's a full set of all meeting materials, one copy for everyone to share in the 3-ring binder, and then there's additional copies of the agenda for folks who wish to have their own copy of the agenda. With that, the next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. We ask folks to stand if you're able. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like more than blue tape between us.
Thank you.
All right, next on our agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. I'll check, as I always do, with staff first. Ms. Olson, are there any changes from a staff perspective that need to be made?
There are no changes made.
All right. Then checking with the council, are there any council changes to the agenda this evening or items that the council would like to remove from consent for separate consideration? No. All right. Then we'll do a quick check with members of the public. If you're here this evening to speak or ask questions about an item at the end of our agenda in section 10, which is known as the consent agenda, those items happen at the end of the meeting and are taken up as a single motion with limited opportunity for public input. But if someone is here to testify on one of those items, this would be the time to let us know, and we can take that item up earlier in the meeting. So once again, items 10A through G, also known as the consent agenda, at the end of our agenda would be taken up late in the meeting and as a single motion. But once again, if somebody is here for one of those items, let us know and we'll take that up earlier. Is there anyone here for an item in section 10? Does not appear to be the case. All right, with that, then we have our agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Etten to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. We have our agenda this evening. Next on the agenda is our first opportunity for public comment. This is a chance for folks to speak on items that are not on tonight's agenda, but may be related to city business or of interest to people in the community. This is an opportunity to, as I said, speak on general items. Is there anyone here this evening who wishes to speak on general items not on tonight's agenda at this time? All right, does not appear to be the case. We'll move then to our agenda items. In our first agenda item this evening, under recognitions and donations, we've actually got 3 items there this evening. The first is a proclamation related to Arbor Day. I'll read the proclamation and then a motion from the council would be in order. The proclamation reads, whereas Roseville's trees have been a significant element of our community because of their beauty and importance to our environment, and whereas trees are an increasingly vital resource for Roseville, enriching our lives by purifying air and water, helping to conserve soil and energy, and in serving as recreational settings and wildlife habitat of all kinds, and whereas activities such as construction damage and pollution, as well as drought and disease, have damaged and destroyed many trees, which are therefore in need of replacement, and whereas the City of Roseville seeks to positively impact our environment by planting trees and ensuring that these trees are nurtured and protected, and whereas trees in our city increase property values, enhance the economic vitality of business areas, and beautify our community, and whereas trees, wherever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal, and whereas trees assist with the drainage and flood mitigation and reduce city costs for sewer and water treatment, and whereas everyone is encouraged to care for our trees and plant as many trees as possible, now therefore be it resolved, the City of Roseville declares April 26th, 2024 as Arbor Day in the City of Roseville.
So moved.
Second. All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Etten, seconded by Councilmember Groff to approve that proclamation. Any discussion on the motion? No. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that proclamation is approved for Arbor Day. Our second proclamation this evening is in relation to Fair Housing Month in Roseville and reads as follows. Whereas the month of April marks the anniversary of the passage of the Federal Fair Housing Law of 1968, recognizing that no American should have their right to purchase or rent shelter of choice abridged because of race, color, religion, sex, handicap, familial status, or national origin, sexual orientation, or gender identity. And whereas equality of opportunity is for all is a fundamental policy of this nation and the city of Roseville, and whereas the location where people live has a direct impact on the quality of their health, education, and access to economic opportunities, and whereas historical racial discriminatory housing practices have created racial and economic segregation in communities that have created disparate outcomes in overall quality of life, including access to homeownership, quality education, healthcare, and transportation as a few examples, and whereas economic stability, community health, and community relations in all communities are improved by diversity and integration, and whereas the City of Roseville is committed to promoting housing choices and fostering inclusive communities free from housing discrimination, and whereas the City of Roseville establishes the City of Roseville as, the City Council, establishes the City of Roseville as an inclusive community committed to fair housing by applying this to its housing programs and services, and promotes appropriate activities by private and public entities intended to provide or advocate for equal housing opportunities for all residents and prospective residents of Roseville. Now therefore be resolved that the City of Roseville hereby declare April to be Fair Housing Month in the city.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve that proclamation. Any discussion on that motion? Councilmember Strawn.
I would just like to add, I really appreciate the efforts of our Community Development Department and the EDA and really making this a living, breathing proclamation that I feel like this is something we've actually done in practice, and I'm really proud of the work that we've had brought forward to us and that we've approved. So,
Thank you, Councilmember Strawn. Other discussion? And I would note that I think the adoption of this proclamation is all hand in hand with those efforts and is part of, I don't want to say approval, but part of being accepted by the Met Council as working towards our housing goals that are set for the City of Roseville. So it's important that we do this and also have the policies in place and the actions that back that up. So thank you for pointing that out. With that, we've got the motion before us to approve this proclamation. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. That proclamation is approved. And finally, under recognitions and donations, it's a special time of the year for us. We get to recognize volunteer activity in Roseville in the specific area of serving on our volunteer advisory commissions. We've got a number of people that are cycling off our commissions this year and want to make sure we recognize them. And so Ms. Olson will do a short presentation, and we've got some certificates to present this evening.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Olson.
Mayor and council members. As the mayor indicated, tonight we're going to be recognizing outgoing commissioners and thanking them for their service. A few of them might be here tonight, but regardless of their attendance, we want to make sure that we recognize them for all that they've done. And we will be sending those who aren't here a signed certificate of appreciation. As you know, commissioner service is one of the toughest volunteer roles. It requires ongoing commitment, additional work, oftentimes outside of the commission meetings, and a lot of behind-the-scenes work to bring recommendations, advice, and issues to the city council for consideration. Each of these commissioners have distinguished themselves as a steward not only of our organization, but also our community. They've each given their time, their knowledge, and their resources with one goal in mind: to continuously improve our Roseville community. The city would not be able to accomplish what we do without the work of our community volunteers. So tonight, we recognize those who have served as commissioners and thank them for all of their time and recognize their contributions to our community. First up is the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission advises the council on short and long-term financial policy matters and reviews annual financial information. Tonight, we are recognizing one outgoing commissioner, Wanda Davies. She was appointed in 2019. The city's Human Rights, Inclusion, and Engagement Commission advises on matters of human rights, inclusion, and engagement. And tonight, we're recognizing 5 outgoing commissioners: Amanda Becker, appointed in 2021, William Hill, appointed in 2023. Catherine McComber, appointed in 2018. Laura Palmquist, appointed in 2021. And Lorianne Williams, appointed in 2023. And last, on our Park and Recreation Commission, this commission makes recommendations related to parks, recreation programs, facilities, and services. And there are two commissioners who are receiving recognition this evening. Daryl Bagenstos, who was appointed in 2017, and Leah Ibarra, I think I said that correctly, appointed in 2021. So each of these commissioners have put in countless hours of volunteer time and provided input and advice to both staff and council, and we just wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you for sharing your time and talents with our community.
I think we do have one representative of a commission, if you can come up, Kathy.
You're the best one, though.
You're going to stand in for everybody else.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Kathy, so much for your service on the Human Rights Inclusion Engagement Commission. I believe you served, if not a full term, maybe even partial term before that.
That's right.
Yeah, so a lot of service and a lot of meetings to attend and a lot of work to do between the meetings. So we really appreciate all that work that you've done for the community and on behalf of the residents of the community on the Human Rights Inclusion Engagement Commission. And we have this certificate of recognition for you.
Thank you very
And
much.
Thank you for your service, and you
Thank you.
feel free to make any remarks you wish to.
Oh, no, just thank you for the opportunity. It was an enjoyable contribution, and I enjoyed the people with whom I worked.
Great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it. And thanks to everybody else who served, and we'll be making sure they get their certificates. In fact, I'm going to give them to Ms. Olson now, just to be sure. Thank you. Right, and with that, then we'll proceed to our business items on our agenda this evening. And we have two items under the business items, 7A being the first one, which is to consider an ordinance amending Chapter 801 of the Roseville City Code related to water meters, specifically water meter deposits. And I'll turn it over to our Public Works Director, Jesse Freihammer, for this item this evening, which is back before the council for final consideration.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So we had presented this item at the February 16th council meeting. We did make a few very minor tweaks to it, but just real quickly to summarize, what we're looking to do with this ordinance is change the water meter deposit to a fee. This is really more of a finance item to simplify things. Basically, a fee would only be paid for new home construction or if someone was adding a water service. Currently, deposits are collected each time an account is changed, but there's really no purpose for the city to collect those deposits, so we don't really have a need. So we are proposing to eliminate that. Currently, if a meter is broken or removed for some other reason, we have other ways to recover the cost of the meter. So the big thing this would do is really save a lot of staff time to track the meters. I know we did present the last time that we would look to phase this out over, basically as homes came and sold. We do understand that council's looking to speed that process up, so we will look in, I know our finance staff is looking into how we can do that, so we're not bringing that tonight for consideration, but we'll bring that back at a later date. So with that, I will close my presentation and answer any questions that the council may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Freihammer, and indeed, this is back before us. Council, any questions for staff on the ordinance that's before us this evening? All right. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this proposed ordinance change? If so, this would be the opportunity to do so. And while you're coming up, just a reminder on public comment, we do have a 3-minute time limit under council rules, and I'll try to enforce that gently and generously. And then also, if you can start your comments with your name and either street or address for the record. Hello and welcome.
Roger S. Jr., Wagner Place, Roseville, Minnesota. And I'm always really interested in how city fees are determined, because I know you're supposed to just kind of recover your costs and not go beyond that. And I thought it was kind of interesting that, let's just look at a single-family home, that the new fee is exactly the same as what the deposit was. I think they're both $340. So I'm wondering now, this new fee, are the people buying the meter? Because I assume it costs $340. That's why the deposit before was $340. So if something happened to it, they had to buy, pay for another one. So I'm wondering, this new $340 is, are we buying the meters, then the property owner owns the meter? Or are there some other expenses that just happen to add up to $340? So I'm just curious how you came up with the $340, the same as the deposit was. So I'm wondering about that, what you're actually collecting the $340 for. And then, you're talking about about the deposit money. I found out last week, which you probably already know this, that usually when I think of deposit, I think I'm giving someone money, they're gonna hang on to it until I return something. But it sounds like the city hasn't been holding on to that money, you've been spending that money. So you don't really have the deposit money. So I would suggest that the next item you're gonna do, you're gonna talk about your cash reserve fund, that you start using the cash reserve fund to pay people back for their meter deposits. So that's a suggestion. But really, I'm just wondering how came up with $340 for a house. And also, since it's something that's, you're changing something that's been in effect for, I don't know how long, 50, 60 years. You should have probably had the finance commission look at it too before you made a decision. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your comments this evening. Is there anyone else from the public who wishes to speak to this item this evening? All right, seeing no one, then we'll close the opportunity for public comment. We've got the request before us, and certainly would maybe take an opportunity here to respond to the questions. I'm not sure if it's entirely a public works thing or if it's a little bit of a finance thing as well, but I'll turn it over to Mr. Freihammer to attempt to answer as much as he can about those.
Yeah, so the meter deposit and the new proposed meter fee, which would be in the fee schedule adopted later in the meeting, is based on the size of the meter, what our current cost is. We just kind of round up just to cover our costs as we set that once a year. But yeah, it does cover just the cost of the meter.
All right, and I'm presuming from a legal point of view, simply because the homeowner is, or the business owner, as the case may be, is paying the city for the cost of the meter, that does not mean that they are establishing any kind of ownership interest in the meter. It's still the city's meter, is that correct?
Correct. I think the city code makes that very clear.
Okay. And if I remember the deposit, the way it worked was that if you made a deposit when you purchased a home, then you got that back when you sold the home, and then the next purchaser would pay the deposit at that point. And what we found over time is that really isn't necessary to the original purpose and intent of having the deposits, and so that's why we're changing the policy. And this fee would only affect new meters in new installations.
Correct.
Right, so if it's an existing homeowner that has a meter replaced for whatever reason, and we talked about this at the last meeting, if it's something that's their fault and that's why it's being replaced, they're responsible for the cost. But then if it's something that's the city's responsibility, the city would pay for the cost of the replacement meter.
Correct.
Okay. And as to the fact that we're spending all our deposit money as was suggested, I think in reality, and I'll lean on my financial associates here who may be able to say it better, but we have that obligation as a what you might say, a deferred liability on the books of the city. That's what a deposit really is, and so it may mean that those funds are sort of like a bank account. It's sort of fluid in what's going on in all the transactions, but basically we still have that obligation that we need to pay back to the people that we made the promise to pay it to. So it's still, that obligation is still there, while the funds may be moving around as part of the business of the city. So I think that answers that question, unless anybody wants to correct. All right, sounds good. Other questions or follow-up from council members now that we've had the presentation and the feedback from the public? Councilmember Strong?
I was just wondering if we had, I know we had very low participation initially, but there were some reminders how we had increased participation in the meter, I guess, kind of related, the people taking pictures of their meters and sending that back.
Oh, for the water
Yeah.
supply?
Yeah,
So, I think we're about 38%. It's still slow, but it has picked up in the last 3 weeks. So,
Okay.
yeah, still encouraging people to help us complete that survey.
so as our public service then, just a reminder to take a picture of your meter and send it in.
And more specifically, your water service overall, because we want to identify if we have any lead water pipes and be able to
Right.
get those taken care of. Yep, yep. For folks who may not have been tracking that at home. And
We
we've, I
should have
think.
gotten a couple
Yeah, I was
notices by
gonna
now,
say,
but.
yep, we've publicized that, but that doesn't always guarantee that everybody's up to
Open
speed
to
on
their
it like we are.
mailbox, yep.
Right, right. All right, once again, and I just did want to check too, do we have an ordinance summary with this one? Or should we have an ordinance summary?
We do not.
Do not. So we would be publishing the whole ordinance, and it's not terribly long, I guess, page and a half, okay. With that, is there a motion from the council related to this particular ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Strawn, seconded by Councilmember Ratten to approve this ordinance. Discussion on the motion as the maker, Councilmember Strawn.
Nothing further.
All right, Councilmember Ratten as the seconder.
I would just concur with the staff note that we'd love to improve our return timing instead of 40 to 50 years, that we return people's money sooner than that.
Here, here. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none, then we've got the motion before us to approve that ordinance change, once again in Chapter 801, related to the water meter deposits becoming a water meter fee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that ordinance is approved. Thank you to Public Works staff for bringing this one back, and we've got more to come on the water ordinances, but that'll be at a later date. That then brings us to our second business item, item 7B, which is to receive our 2023 cash reserve fund report and consider transfers per the policy. And I'll turn it over to our finance director, Michelle Petrick, to bring this item before us this evening. Ms. Petrick.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The city has an operating fund reserve policy. A copy of that was included in your packet. And I'm trying to get the analysis up here.
That's better.
All right. And every year, there are certain funds that are examined to determine if their fund reserves are in excess of their high reserve level. And what that means, we've got a minimum and a maximum reserve for certain funds which are either tax supported, mixed tax and fee supported, or fee supported only. And for 2023, based on unaudited numbers, the Parks and Recreation Fund is above its high target range of 30%. And that's 30% of the operating budget for the next year. The License Center Fund is above its high target, which is 15%, by $327,318. One of the reasons the Parks and Recreation Fund has achieved a higher reserve is because there has been more participation in programs, but we also did increase the tax levy for the Parks and Recreation Fund. The License Center received a one-time transfer from the state of Minnesota of $127,697. And that was in recognition of the additional staff time that deputy registrars are now spending under the MinDrive system. As you may recall, you used to be able to go in and renew a driver's license in about 10 minutes. Transactions are taking about 20 minutes because the deputy registrars are now doing all the data entry that was previously split between deputy registrar and the state. So we did receive a one-time infusion to offset that additional time. The general fund as presented here is estimated to end the year with a 38% cash reserve. When it comes to audited figures, the general cash reserve fund gets rolled into the general fund. So when we present the audit, the reserves look higher than the range, but we have a specific target range for the general fund only, which is 35 to 50%. And as a reminder, the general fund is the fund of last resort, and it is predominantly supported by property taxes, which is why it has the higher reserve ratio. The communications fund is the other fund that we've examined and looked at over the years. And it is estimated to finish the year at a 12% cash reserve, which is above its minimum of 10%. Previously, we included the information technology fund in this analysis, but that has been rolled into the administration department within the general fund. And as part of the budget process, all fund reserves were reallocated through the budget process to cover equipment that's being purchased directly in the departments in 2024. So with that, we're recommending 2 transfers from Parks and Rec and the License Center into the excess cash reserve fund. And if those transfers occur, the excess cash reserve fund would have slightly over $1 million at the end of 2023. So with that, are there any questions?
All right, thank you, Ms. Patrick. Questions from the council? Councilmember Groff.
Just a question on the one-time infusion of money from the state to the deputy registrars to make up that time difference. Next year, we won't have that. How is that going to be handled?
Well, we just won't increase our fund reserves above the high level.
Sure.
We also were successful in 2024 in getting the fees raised
Yes.
slightly.
Okay. Thanks.
And just to clarify, those are the deputy registrar fees that are set by the state?
Correct.
Those were increased, got it, okay,
Yes.
thank you. Other questions from the council? Councilmember Strawn?
I had 2 questions. One was about the Parks and Rec Fund. Obviously, it's not a huge over target, but I'm wondering if there was any fee reconsideration, given that, just so that, we are the fees or the scholarship are an equal, so we come a little bit closer, and so we continue to provide that value to our residents in a way that they expect. Now, here comes Mr. Johnson.
Parks and Rec Director Johnson?
Well, I would remind you that the Parks and Rec Fund is not 100% fee supported.
Yeah.
Right.
We do put a property tax into it, but
Thank you, Mayor and Council Member. In answer to your question, we do try pretty hard to keep our fee-supported rec programs to, in that fee column, essentially pay for their expenses.
Right.
We did increase our scholarship usage this year. It's the first time we've been over $10,000, which is a victory and a positive thing. We still are grossly under, or not grossly, but we are under what our similar cities charge for our fees. So we think that we're fair, but we certainly do try to keep that as low as possible. We did find that somewhere around half of our scholarship users were hitting our scholarship maximum, which indicates that they're using all the money, which is a good thing, but it also could indicate that they're not able to take further advantage of other programs. So it is a fair part of the conversation, but we certainly try to keep our fees as low as possible, and we're pretty intentional on the expense side to make sure that we come in where we plan on it.
Right. Well, and then I'm sure in follow-up to that, and I know we've had this conversation, just the safe and sick leave and how that will impact your very part-time summer and seasonal staff, where you have to take that into consideration. So that will be a cost that hadn't existed in the past. And as we also raised our rates a bit so that we could be more competitive for summer staff and things. So I know those will all impact. And just on the License Center, I know that given that we are having to provide so much more service, I was wondering if we were able to add any staff on a more long-term basis in order to accommodate that with the fees as they were.
We're actually examining that directly because we just received notice of a retirement, which is going in a lead position, so we will have the shuffle upwards amongst staff. But when we built the '24 budget, we didn't know Maplewood was gonna close their license center. And so we have seen quite a increase in customers. I did run a brief analysis, and if we were to take one of our three-quarter employees and make them full-time, we would just about break even, the cost versus the revenues. And it was a very conservative analysis, so I truly believe that moving one of our employees to full-time will break even. It'll allow us to serve more customers. It will also allow us to expand the hours of our knowledge-based testing. So I have put in a request to the city manager to increase that now, and we'll be examining again during the budget.
Thank you. Yeah,
if
I've
we need-
noticed the increase even just in time waited, and had other people mention it, but again, it's a service that people very much appreciate, so.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some of that time is just beyond our control because the staff do have to do all the entry and all the copying. And so, in the past, the state would do some of the entry.
Other questions, Councilmember Atten?
I would note that I think that makes a lot of sense to make that increase, even if we're not gonna make a bunch of money, but rather to ensure that we're getting quality service to folks who are coming in. It's a very public part of our work here in Roseville. I hear about the Roseville License Center all the time from people. So, and so we wanna make sure that stays positive by serving that well. I know I was part of the passing of this fund policy, but it bugs me a little bit that the only major department that is having money to pull out is the Park and Rec Department. The police are not called out separately, the fire is not called out separately, Public Works, not admin, right? So we never see if those departments are breaking over a line. We have them all mushed together in the in the general fund. And so we get a skewed perspective, and I feel like one major department is taking all of the departmental level withholdings right now. So anyway, it frustrates me about that. I think the policy leaves a lot of departments without scrutiny, and clearly the Park and Rec Fund has provided a large amount of money over time. I appreciate that we've noted this, and we kind of track which departments are providing what, but it's quite clear that there's only one real department that's doing this right now, so.
Well, and in some cities, the Park and Rec Department is part of the general fund.
I was gonna say, certainly we could do that.
Right. Here, it's actually two funds. It is the Recreation Fund and the Parks Maintenance Fund. Parks Maintenance is 100% tax supported. As Matt noted, the fee-based programs in recreation, the costs and the revenues, they try to match. But they do have a number of programs that are not fee supported. Is it unfair? Probably. In my past life, if a Parks and Recreation Fund had extra, it generally went to the Capital Improvement Fund. And as you might recall, we already took 200,000 out of this fund and put it into the Parks and Rec Vehicle and Equipment Fund. And that fund will continue to need financial support, either through levy increases or through future transfers out of this excess cash reserve fund. Public Works, Police, Fire, we've talked about their equipment as well. Those funds do need support. We do internally analyze budget versus actual by departments. That's part of our audit procedures. before the auditors come on board. And if we do have a department that exceeds its budget, we would report it in the footnotes. We've been fortunate that everybody has managed their budgets appropriately and have come in under their budgets. We don't tax a tax, we don't set a tax, I guess, for police or for fire or admin. All of that's considered general government, so it goes into the property tax levy for the general fund. That's the differentiation. I mean, we could certainly stop having separate funds for the parks and recreation and just merge it all into the general fund, but, we can look at
I think it's a thing
alternatives.
for further discussion, and my point with other budgets were not that they were in the red, but rather potentially in the black, significantly, and that when the Park and Rec department is in the black, money's taken away, and when other departments are, we don't even know. We have no idea. As a council, we don't see that broken out. Maybe part of the audit process, but the council does not see that broken down, so we don't know. So I'm concerned about how this works and that one department is losing cash. Not always, I mean, certainly some of that's coming back to the department, but we're also not taking, if the police department's ahead in the black, at the end of the day, we're not taking money from that and putting it into police cars, right?
Well-
In the same way that this is okay, we're taking it from this operation and put it into this capital expense.
I think the
So-
difference is that this is much more obvious or much more apparent because we have separate funds
Yes.
for the Park and Recreation Department. And we don't have those same separate funds for other departments. On the other hand, I don't know that I completely agree with the characterization as taking money away from Parks and Recreation either, because to the extent, for instance, that might be property tax money, we don't, once again, levy a tax by department. We levy a tax and some of it goes to a department. So it gets into, once again, ideally, everybody would be spending exactly what they
Yeah.
budget. And in reality, it doesn't always happen, and it just happens that the Parks and Rec fund, because it's a separate fund, shows up in our rollover. But I think that there was a point well taken that it's completely as part of the policy that you supported, also a decision-making by the council as to what is done with those funds. And it was noted, the recent decision to put funds back into the Park and Recreation Equipment Fund was taking essentially park funds and putting it back into parks. So I mean, there's some thoughtfulness to this on the part of the
Yeah.
council.
Well, I'm not saying it's not thoughtful, I just think that most things are sliding under our radar as a council. And, I mean, $1 million has been pulled into this cash reserve fund over the last 5 years, so.
And at least for the benefit of the Parks and Recreation Department, we haven't decided to cut the parks budget by the amounts that we've seen rolled over every year, because that certainly could have been a decision
Fair.
process. Councilmember Shorter.
Yeah, well, I think it's not so much, I don't think we want to roll the Parks and Rec in. I think what you're saying is you want more detail of the other departments possibly to see if they are running compared to their budget.
As a starting point, I think that's generally in a budget, I would love to understand more of how our other departments are
Right.
doing.
So
It
that-
shows up in this way, and it highlights it, the lack of transparency isn't the right word, but
Right.
the lack of available information about our other departments is highlighted in this kind of
Right.
situation.
Which I'll also, but even in this cash, I was going to point out the EDA is actually called out in our operating fund reserve policy, but yet we do not see the
reported.
we do not see that fund anywhere. And I know it doesn't roll into the excess cash reserve, but since it's in the policy stating this is their, should maintain a reserve of 35%, I think it's important that we actually see the fund where that's at. And then maybe that's another one that's, has quite a pile of money in it, and so do you leave it in EDA fund, or is there something to be done with that as well? But I sure would like to see it.
Well, we certainly do see it, so there's two different things that are reported. This is
Right.
specifically to the excess cash fund policy, which
Right.
relates to specifically these funds. And then we also have our annual reporting
Right.
on just our reserve levels in all of our funds. And that's where we see the EDA and all of our capital funds and all of those
But this one's
reported.
particularly called out, it's because it talks about certain funds are at a certain percentage.
Right, that's the
Yes,
operating, that's the
yes.
overall fund
Right.
reserve policy for all the funds, and that's the reporting that we get on
Right.
all the funds in our annual
But my
reporting.
point being, I don't know if we want it not being part of this.
Well, we have two things, is
I know
one,
it's a separate item.
we may
but-
not be able to mix the money,
Right. No, I know, but I mean, you might be able to do something,
but we do get it reported as part of the budgeting process for the EDA.
Yes.
And we've made a point of making sure that we
that
go
last
forward and
time,
do that
yes,
better.
yes.
Right,
But again, I'm just, and,
Yeah.
you know, it's in the policy, so I guess I'd still like to see
Yeah,
it.
but it's not in the policy related to this action this evening. That's
Right.
in the cash carry forward policy.
That's true, I mean, you know,
Because the reserve policy applies to a lot more funds than just what we're looking at
right,
tonight.
right. So on that side, anyways, I'm just, because it's just, I think my point being is I'm agreeing with Councilmember Etten that more information is better than less. So that's just the point.
Sure, and maybe there is a way that we can, even as part of this, when we look at the general fund, we could somehow have some kind of breakdown as to what contributed to the general fund's status, if that's possible, in the department way. I think that might be a way to get at that.
Yeah, I mean, there's ways to break the expenditures down. The differentiation is we don't have, outside of property taxes, revenues dedicated to administration, to police, to fire. I mean, we've got some revenues, but not,
We have fees for several of those departments, and Public Works and Fire, we have fees for inspections, and so, I mean, there are various fund sources that drive all of these budgets. So
But
that is,
that is a good point, though, that, I mean, if you're just applying the levy to the fund, you don't, there's nowhere where we say police is this much of the levy, other than sort of our generalization of the, so I think that's the challenge from an accounting point of
Yeah.
view.
Yep.
yeah.
So, but maybe we can think about it some.
Okay, thank you.
I did have one question about the License Center, only because I know we've got that internal loan that was related to the purchase of the building.
That's been paid off.
It is paid off, so that won't be impacted by this then. So that answers that question. That's good. All right. Moving on then. All right, other questions from the council? All right, I do want to provide an opportunity if there is anyone from the public this evening that wants to speak to the request to note the over policy maximums of the couple of funds and do those transfers. This would be the opportunity. Is there anyone from the public to speak to this item? Right, seeing no one, we've got the request before the council. Is there a motion
So
from the council?
moved.
Second.
All right. Moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Groff, to authorize the transfers as noted in the staff report from those two funds into the cash carry forward fund. And then later on, we'll have the opportunity over the course of time to determine if we need to take anything out of that carry forward fund to use for other purposes. But this is to put those funds in. We've got that motion before us. Councilmember Schroeder is the maker of the motion. Any further discussion? And Councilmember Groff is the seconder.
No, it's just keeping in line with our policy that we have now. I think this was a good discussion, but those things I think would have to be taken up in a different meeting. That's my opinion.
Certainly. Any other discussion on the motion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously, and those transfers are approved. That brings us to consideration of council minutes. We've got the minutes of our March 4th council meeting as well as our February 26th council meeting. Do we need to take those up as separate motions or?
Yes, please.
All right. All right, is there, well, first of all, are there any changes or corrections to the March 4th minutes as presented? Otherwise, is there a motion to
Move
approve?
approval of March 4th minutes.
All right.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Graff, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to approve the March 4th minutes. All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Any abstentions?
Me. Or somebody.
All right, that motion is approved
never know how to
4
answer
to
that
0
Myself and all.
with Councilmember Bratton abstaining. All right, we then have the motion, or the minutes from our February 26th council meeting. Is there a motion to approve those or any changes or corrections needed?
So moved.
Second.
That's been moved by Councilmember Bratton, second by Councilmember Schroeder. Discussion on that motion. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the February 26th minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions?
One. Aye.
All right,
Me.
that
Right.
motion
I don't
is
know.
approved 4 to
Abstain.
0 with
Somebody.
Councilmember Strawn abstaining. All right. That then brings us to our consent agenda. And Ms. Olson, if you give us a brief description of the items on the consent agenda this evening. And we raced through the meeting here, so hopefully we've got a chance to catch up.
Let's try that one more time. All right. Tonight, item 10A approves payments in the amount of $2,666,505.39. Item 10B approves several purchases over $10,000. The first one includes the purchase of 4 ballistic shields and shield transports for officer safety in the amount of $36,004. This will be paid using public safety aid dollars. Second item is the annual contractual pavement painting in the amount of $15,200. The third item is removal of trees as part of the County Road B reconstruction project. The majority of trees being removed are along the trail on the south side of the road adjacent to Midland Hills Country Club, and they're being removed due to the trail construction and storm sewer improvements. And we're removing those trees outside of the project based on MnDOT guidelines to prevent disrupting the nesting season of the endangered long-eared bat. And the last item on that purchases over $10,000 is every year the city rehabilitates segments of the bituminous trails and parking lots. So $180,000 has been budgeted for this contractual work in the 2024 CIP. And we've received quotes for the Roseville Skating Center North Parking Lot, Howard Johnson Parking Lot, and Owasso Hills Pathway. And this item would award the project to Bituminous Roadways Incorporated with this project. Item 10C approves 2 temporary gambling permits. One is for the Roseville American Legion, which is holding a raffle on July 4th and September 15th. And the other is for Minnesota Boxer Rescue, which is holding a bingo event at Bent Brewstillery on May 5th. Item 10D approves an ordinance amending the city's fee schedule. This has a couple different items in there. In February, the council amended Chapter 703 regarding bus benches in the right-of-way. And as part of that amendment included a 2-year license. And due to the length of the license, the fee schedule needs to be updated. There are a couple other changes as well, including the change from the water meter deposit to a fee, as well as the removal of fees listed for traffic signals and streetlights from the electrical inspector for residential fees. Item 10E is an update on city grant applications. Grant dollars awarded in 2023, which does not include city contributions, totaled $2,103,617. And in 2024, the grant dollars have totaled $859,287. Item 10F approves a professional service agreement with AE2S, which is Advanced Engineering and Environmental Services. This is to perform on-call consulting services for maintenance of the city's SCADA software. They've been doing this for several years, and services are on an on-call basis. This is approving the contract for a period of 2 years. And 10G, the last item on there, approves a drainage easement over Lot 17A, Block 1, Owasso Shores, that allows for grading and turf reinforcement to improve drainage and maintain access for owners. There's no cost for the easement, and the overall cost of the improvements is estimated to be $35,000 and paid for by the Storm Sewer Fund. Once quotes are received, staff will bring an item forward for council approval on that item. And that is the consent agenda.
All right, thank you, Ms. Olson. Is there a motion on the consent items?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Groff, seconded by Councilmember Bratton, to approve those items. Any discussion on the motion? Councilmember Strawn?
I just had a question about the temporary gambling permit by the Minnesota Boxer Rescue. being held at Bent Brew Distillery, and that does not count then toward Bent Brew Distillery's limit in a year of activities?
This is, I believe, a permit for the temporary gambling as opposed to their alcohol-related events. They have
Okay.
12 permitted events specific to their license for the serving of alcohol, but this is a temporary gambling permit, so it's
Okay,
separate.
I just wanted to clarify, just since they have had quite a few things come forward and make sure it's not considered a separate event. Thank you.
And this is, I believe the permit is actually held by the charity as opposed to
That's
Bent Brew Distillery. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions on the motion?
No.
All right, hearing none, all those in favor of approving these consent items signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously. Those items are approved. Next is future agenda review. Ms. Olson, once again, this is an opportunity for you to update us on the future meetings coming up.
Sure, thank you. Your next meeting is April 8th, and on that meeting agenda, you will be considering issuing an RFP for the Lexington Park Playground. We'll also be bringing back the hotel licensing ordinance for further consideration. There is an abatement assessment for 435 Judith. In addition, we have scheduled the continued conversation regarding changes to the HRIEC. And we will also be introducing the new equity and inclusion manager who starts next Monday, March 25th. April 15th is a work session, and on that agenda are several items. One is recycling RFP and the cart discussion. We will also be receiving 2 updates, one on the County Road C project and another on our forestry EAB program. We'll also be receiving a smoke-free housing presentation, and we've scheduled a preliminary discussion on strategic planning. And then I do have April 22nd, which is, I don't know why it says work meeting, but it is a meeting.
We're going to do work at that meeting.
Good.
This one
Oh,
has,
that's an older edition. There was one that came out on the 8th.
oh, okay. This one has the amendment to chapter 10 comp plan process that was removed from the last,
Code.
the
Update.
code. And then we'll also have a presentation on Highway 36 from MnDOT and their multimodal study. And then we'll hopefully be considering that Roseville police officer contract as well.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. Are there questions from the council on upcoming meeting agendas? Great. Any council liaison reports or council member initiated items for future meetings or council announcements?
Nope.
Doesn't appear to be the case. There is only one remaining item on the agenda this evening, which is adjournment.
So moved?
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Councilmember Schroeder, seconded by Councilmember Strawn to adjourn. No discussion on a motion to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and we are adjourned at 6:52. Thank you, everyone.